wonderful man.
You took after him.
I did what?
You took after him.
Oh, yeah, right, honest and, yeah.
Forthright.
Now, Mary was the oldest, and then how did the sequence of the children go? 'Cause there were
Well,
2 boys, and then,
It was, did Marjorie come next?
Yeah, Marjorie and Angela and Alice was the.
Alice was the baby girl.
oh, she was.
She was the baby of the family.
Yeah, she was.
Oh.
And then Bill was the elder of the
Oldest
2 boys, and then Dan.
Yes.
And Bill was the one who went in the army, and Dan was in the army, but had a law degree by then, so he
was
fought
an
his.
officer.
He was an officer. He fought his war in Paris in the legal department, and Bill fought it, you know, on the battlefields. And Bill worked for the local bank after he got out, and Dan was a lawyer, and I think was a district attorney for a while, and then assistant DA, and then he went into practice with my grandfather, his Dugan and Dugan. And so that brings John's out of college, and he's got the GI Bill. He graduates from a union.
Maybe you'll remember this. This is a memory that I have of whichever Dugan, it must have been Dan, but I'm not sure, who didn't live very far from the Danker Avenue, you know, that Mary and grandfather lived. And we went over to this place, this house, and in the back there was a garage, sort of, and on the side of the garage was painted this big Indian head with a big headdress and the feathers. And do you have any recollection of that?
I don't. I know the house you're talking about. That was Dan's house.
Dan.
Down sort of a little hill, and then there was a street along in front of it that was sloped, and it had a brick house, and there was a garage behind it.
Okay, it had to have been that. We went over there. I can remember going there. I don't remember the people.
Was there 2 streets and an island between them?
That I don't remember.
I mean, it was
There
same
was a
streets.
porch on the front. I have vague recollections.
Was
I
it a
don't remember
stone
anything.
house? I mean,
Brick.
It might have been.
the brick house was
All I
Dan's.
remember is this
Yeah,
big
Bill had one over
painting on
Manning
the back
Boulevard.
in the garage. On the side of the garage was this in the
Do
back.
you remember the house at all?
No.
Because
Really
one
not.
was sort of old looking, and the other was a really.
No brick house.
It was old. I remember
That was
old.
Bill,
Yeah, that was.
I remember-
like
it
an old
is-
porch and
Yes. Yes.
trees.
Yes.
That's Bill.
Okay.
And I don't ever remember seeing that Indian head.
Yeah, I mean, huge, the whole side of the garage.
I don't remember ever going in the back of the house.
Oh, well, there were kids there, and I don't know who they were, but anyway.
You were probably playing cowboys and Indians
Yeah,
with
probably.
Jack.
I wasn't that old.
Mm.
I don't know, 8, 9, maybe.
So what did John do after union?
Well, I started out as servicing radios and televisions and
What was the name of your business?
Square Deal Electronics.
How about that?
And after a year of having people say, "I'll pay you Monday," I decided it was better to work for somebody that paid you every week, and so I went to work with an international paper company as an engineer, and spent my whole working life as an engineer
Mhm.
for an international paper company. I was
And at that,
plant engineer in 3 mills, and spent some time in Maine.
and at that time, when was it when you were working for Square Deal, or when you went to the mill, you met your mommy,
Yes.
Connie Nadeau,
Mhm.
who was the daughter of the hotel owner.
It was, when I was in college, going up summers.
And there was a marriage.
Mhm.
And was at that wedding.
Yes,
Yes.
And
it was tie-in, I think. The
Yeah.
meal.
her parents owned the Ticonderoga Inn,
Mm-hmm.
and they were really nice people. Did you know them very well or know them?
Yeah.
And they were just so good to kids. They were so warm and nice, and I was very fond of them. So who came along then, after you got married?
Well,
Who was
Paula
the,
came
who was the
along.
baby?
The little baby was named Paula.
After me.
Yeah.
After me. My name was Paul David. Or it was after Aunt Paula and
Probably.
Switzerland.
Well, it was this combination of, but that was before we knew that you were going to turn out to be famous. Or we would have called him Paul, or Paul.
So he gets married, he goes into the mill and raises a family and lives in Ticonderoga, and then along came Jack,
Jack?
And
Yeah,
then-
he was still in Ticonderoga.
and you built your house out on the lake.
Yes. And then I was sent to Maine to build a new paper mill. I was a project engineer, and Mary came along.
As a project.
She was one of my projects. And after that, I stopped projecting.
Fortunately, right?
And then from Maine, I went to Ticonderoga to build another mill there. And then to Mobile, Alabama, in the engineering department. And I went back to build an expansion in Maine, and then I retired. I had enough. At 55. While David was out.
Well, I graduated from DePaul in 1952, and the Korean War was by that time on. Just, it had been on for a year or two, and so I had to go in service. So in order to avoid the draft, I joined the Marine Corps. Smart, always was smart. Went to,
They wouldn't let them in the swift boats.
wouldn't let me in swift boat, so I joined the Marines and went into officers training and became a second lieutenant. Spent 3 years in the Marines, and it was supposed to be a 4-year hitch, but the war ended and they let people out early, so I spent 3 years, came out first lieutenant, and then when I was in service, I decided I wanted to get into the movie business, not having any idea, except I thought I wanted to be a director. The romantic image of Elia Kazan or one of those great directors. And so I went out to, after I got out, I went out to Los Angeles, drove across the country in an old Studebaker, and long story short, took about 7 years to break into the business. I took odd jobs through and sort of did starve, but didn't live very luxuriously. And finally got started as a writer and was a freelance writer for about 15 years, I guess from the beginning of I went out there, and then I decided I wanted to try the directing too, so I was able to parlay my writing skills at that point into an opportunity to direct, and then became a writer-director, and then I ended the last 12 years of my career was as an executive producer running primetime dramatic shows, network shows, and I had it like John when I was 62. He was smart, he got out early, and so I retired, and I had married when I was 35. I was a bachelor till I was 35, and then married and had one child, Amy, and 2 stepchildren, one of which died. Leslie, at 19, was drowned in a pool, and so that left Jason, her brother from a former marriage of my wife's, who was like my son because he was with me since he was 4 years old. So I had Amy then and Jason, and that marriage ended after 17 years, I guess. And I met my present wife, Jerry Taylor, in a working, she was a writer, and we became friends really first for about a year before anything happened romantically, and which is a great way to start a relationship because we were friends.
Were you
And
both working on the same project?
we met on
Yeah.
Quincy, the
Quincy.
show, and I put her on staff because she wrote so well and had great legs, and and she was a really very, very good writer, and she became a producer, and so we had that working relationship for about a year before anything romantic happened, and then we were married, and we just had our 18th, and had known each other actually for about 24 years, and it's a really good marriage, and we're both very happy. At least I am. I think she is. And so here we are in Athens.
Yes, it's wonderful. Well, other things, I've questioned Dad before and he's brought up different things, but I have images only to go on most of the time from old photographs, and I guess I'm looking for what was going on. What do you remember of, say, when you and Dad and great-grandfather Dugan were on the ocean liner? I think Aunt Alice was in the picture and something.
Oh, I know
The
that
big
picture.
steam
Mhm.
stacks were
Mhm.
coming up, and I think what was going on in your minds at that time? Was it just really exciting? Was this...
I think John's going to have to tell you
Yeah,
that
you
because
don't remember that
I
much?
was so young, and I've
Mhm.
seen that picture.
Yes.
And I can remember I had short pants with my skinny legs,
And you
and
don't
I can
remember that
remember
much?
John's freckle face.
Yes.
I can see that picture, and
Yes.
Mother with a hat,
Mm-hmm.
and I was about 5, you must have been around 8.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing I remember was that somehow one or two of the members of the crew wanted me to go fishing, deep sea fishing. So they got a hook about this big
I remember.
and about a ½ inch in diameter, and
And a big rope.
a big rope, and I couldn't see over the railings, but they lowered it down, and all of a sudden I feel some wiggling and a big pull on it, and I say pull up, and I pull up and get a big flounder this big, completely gutted and skinned, and I thought it was real, It looked like a fish to me, and
Yeah.
the cook they lowered it down the porthole, and the cook put it on the hook, and then we had it for supper that night, dinner.
I think there's a picture of that. holding
Yeah,
that.
holding that.
Oh my. That's neat.
And I remember one of the men I met was, he was the inventor of that cheese, that square cheese that...
Greer?
No, it's a yellow or orange cheese that comes in a
Velveeta.
Velveeta cheese or
Oh,
something.
really?
And he used to take me to they had a horse gambling place, and he'd give me a few pennies, and we'd bet on different horses.
Where was this?
On the ship.
Oh,
And I don't know, he's a famous guy. I don't know why he
Jesus.
picked me out.
Should have
Mhm.
befriended him for life, you would have been the Velveeta Baron instead of working in the mill.
Well, he might have become a priest in the second part of his life, so I don't know.
He liked John.
So you don't really remember being in Europe at that time? Or
Just
traveling? Just
very.
like that?
I remember going into the Blue Grotto, which
Yeah, I remember that.
which is a cave in Sicily, is it?
Well, I don't think it's Sicily, but it's.
But you had to get off the ship in a rowboat, which felt sort of.
Yeah.
And then you rowed, and there was the Blue Grotto. There was this cave opening in the ocean on the side of a rock face, and you had to duck your heads, and you went in, and then it opened up into a cavernous place, which was blue because of the color of the water. So that I remember.
Mhm.
The other thing I remember is that when we were in Italy, the way they, when you went on the train or something, the way they, if you could pass under a bar this side or something, you didn't have to pay because, and that was for kids, 1 to 10 or something, and they didn't have to pay. But we were so tall, even though I was less than 10 or whatever the age was, that I don't remember if David did or not.
No, I was.
Oh, stop.
Mother did, because the Italian kids were shorter.
Just to put that time in perspective, that was about 1935, and at that very moment in Europe, Hitler was on the rise, and he was militarizing Germany, and World War II would start in 3 years, in 1938.
I also remember getting dragged into all these churches. That's all I saw. I said, oh no, not another church. That's all it seemed like all we visited was churches.
Well, the Dugans were very religious, and the churches are beautiful over there. I still, whenever we go over, we get hauled into all the churches too.
And one time, the grandfather had a meeting with the Pope, and we went in to see him, and he patted me on the head. And since then, I've never been right.
It's a wonder you didn't become a priest.
I know.
What do you
I thought about it
remember-
for years.
Did you?
Yeah.
What do you remember, what funny things do you remember, if you remember anything, with your mom? Do you remember, she seemed to have such a sense of humor when I was around her, which was very limited times, but was
She,
was she very
she was
strict?
she was a wonderful, warm woman,
Mhm.
but she had the dictatorial Swiss husband, and that was not an easy life, because he wanted his way, and his way was the right way. And I will say that one of the things I think we both got out of that is a sense of discipline. And that's the only way you get any place in life. You don't get any place without it. And I think from his work ethic and his expectations and his discipline, I think that as much as we rankled against it, was beneficial.
Like George Bush W., we could never say daddy.